Well, good morning, everyone. We are just truly energized and excited to be here with you. You will notice we are one of the largest panels this morning, so we're going to, in response to Sarah's challenge as the moderator, we're going to do our very best to stay within our time frame, but we thank you and we are honored to be here and to have this conversation with you. And we want to give, as it relates to the last panel, we want to give a major thank you to Crystal, who couldn't have done a better layup in the very first panel with the early childhood conversation, talking about STEM education, because that's what this panel is about. And believe me when I tell you that you have amazing women who are about to bring forward a very diverse perspective relative to their careers and to their journeys, and just what does STEM education mean for them, but also for the generations that are coming behind them. So please welcome. They're going to give you some brief intros, but we know you have the bios in front of you, right, with the QR code, so we're not going to give you a full bio, right? But please welcome Dr. Jackie Ward, who's the Assistant Director at the White House Office of Science, Technology, and Policy. To her left, we have Anita Jenkins, who is the CEO of Howard University Hospital. And then we have Shannon, who serves as the Senior Vice President for Federal and Research and Development at Palantir Technologies. And last but not least, we have Teletha Brown, who's the Director of Strategic Business Transformation for Commercial Strategy and Operations for Johnson & Johnson. So please welcome this amazing panel of women who are going to come forward for you. And again, they're going to just give you, the Cliff Notes version, right, of their bios and their background so you can understand the diversity and the amazing perspective that sits before you. So we'll start with you, Dr. Ward.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm Jackie Ward. I will keep it very brief. I am an assistant director in the Health Outcomes Division at the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. I've been there since the beginning of the Biden-Harris administration. I'm a neuroscientist by training, and I will also say I'm inspired by the last panel. I am a lifelong swimmer and was a competitive swimmer growing up, so that was great to hear.
My name is Anita Jenkins, and while I started, when you start talking about the thread, I started out as a respiratory therapist, working night shift in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My dad was a steelworker. My mom and dad could not afford for me to be a full-time student, but I kept moving on while getting several degrees, one by one class at a time. Lived in Alabama, put first husband through school, and look at that thread. And then lived and worked in Virginia and Ohio, continuing my career. Was blessed to continue the stage. I am now a CEO, and absolutely excited to talk about not just science, technology, education, and math, but also a second M, and that's medicine. And so we have to talk about that level of, that next level of training that women must be engaged in. So we know that there's lots of nurses, but at that level of leadership, we dwindle out heavily, and there's very few at the high level of leadership in medicine.
Hi, I'm Shannon Clark. As we noted, I lead our R&D practice at Palantir Technologies. And let me just say, I'm excited to be on a panel of all women because being at a technology company, it's usually the case where I'm sitting on a panel and I'm the only woman. So it's very exciting to be with all of you today. I started my career as an intelligence analyst. I was at university when 9/11 happened, and it kind of quickly propelled my career when I could see the Pentagon burning from my college dorm room. And I was an eager analyst that was wanting to do more with technology that was in front of me to help our national security. And so after spending a lot of time in Afghanistan and some other fun hotspots of the world, I realized that what I wanted to do was lead the strategy and development for some of the better technology that we could put forward to this country to help our national security and help that of our allies. So I'm really excited to be a part of that today and excited to have this conversation this morning. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Teletha Brown, good morning. Really excited to be on this panel of amazing women in this room of amazing women having conversations that are absolutely pivotal to where we are right now. I know how she described my title was a lot of words. We can just go problem solver, and that'll cover all of it. And then I am here as a member of WeSTEM, which is one of the internal programs for Johnson & Johnson that's really focused on bringing women forward in the sciences, and really everywhere from 5-year-old girls all the way up to when women may or may not leave the workforce for a temporary time and bringing them back. there's programs along that gamut. And so it's funny that that's not my day job, but that's the thing that I get to do and really have passion for. And they sent me here so that I can talk about it. So that's super awesome. And I started my career as a formulation scientist, like literally in the laboratory, making formulations for tox studies. So I've had a lot of opportunity to see science all the way through and continue to work my passion. So I've got a lot to say about this topic. I will keep it short.
Like I said, we're going to do our best, right? We are absolutely going to do our best. And this is going to feel a little bit like a speed round, so I'm just going to apologize in advance, and I know you're going to keep up, and I know you're going to be able to engage with these women after this conversation. And let me just say, as an engineer, graduating in engineering and now serving as the executive director for the STEM Funders Network, it is absolutely my honor and pleasure to serve with you and to moderate this conversation for you. Because we're going to give you a K through 16 perspective, and K through 16, just to make sure everybody's clear about that, kindergarten going all the way through higher education, whatever that might be, 4 or 2 year. We're going to go through a K through 16 perspective, right, and how it relates to where they sit now. So we're going to start with Dr. Ward, because there was an article that came out last year, 3 deans, all of whom are black and STEM deans, and they wrote an article that was titled "The Moonshot for Every Kid." And so, actually, my bad, we're going to start with Shannon, because it starts with, from a national security perspective, they indicated that one of our greatest challenges and one of our greatest opportunities exists with how we make the trajectory towards national security opportunities more inclusive, because of the very exclusive nature as it sits right now in terms of lack of minorities, lack of women sitting in these spaces and places, that we're at risk, and it's a blind spot for us, right? So, Shannon, as we kind of shift to you and talk about your perspective and because of your background, right? So the question is, how can we encourage girls and young women from different races, ethnicities, and socioeconomic backgrounds to pursue STEM careers? What disparities exist currently, and what can we do to address them?
Yeah, well, I think, seeing is believing. They need to be able to see what's out there and what's available to them. But I think more importantly, we really need to broaden the scope of what we think about what STEM includes. I mean, I just told you my background is an intelligence analyst. I don't think anyone would jump out and say, like, you're going to start to work in a career in STEM. When I was in university, I didn't study computer science. I was not an engineer like you. When I thought about fields that had to do with engineering, they scared me. I was a language lover. I traveled around the world and spent a lot of time in other countries learning languages. I didn't study math. But what I did realize is there's a place for other folks that are not just strictly engineers, folks that are not just doctors or chemists, to be involved in this community. And I think one of the things we need to do is broaden the perception of what STEM means. There are so many jobs that STEM needs to support it. There's financial jobs, there's creative, jobs in terms of designing jobs, there's business applications jobs, there's strategic jobs. You said problem solver. We need problem solvers. We don't just, so it takes more than that. And I think being able to talk to folks and being able to explain to children that, hey, STEM doesn't mean that you need to be an astronaut, a chemist, a biologist, but it means that this community needs others that, like I said, you might be a designer. I would think of the folks that support us every day and the ones that create mocks of what our technology needs to look like. Those were the folks that were drawing when they were little and were passionate about it. So how do we work with folks to actually broaden that? Because I do think, when we look at the geopolitics of the world right now, when we look at the wars that are going on and the technology that's helping our allies and helping us, like, we need folks that are like I said, are broadening just beyond the strict, I think, definition right now that we sometimes see of what STEM opportunities exist today.
No, thank you for that. And I want to go back to, thank you, Teletha, for that problem solver, right? As I sit and I look out in this room and I see Brianna and Brooke, who were honored last night for being problem solvers. We want to thank you again for your work that you're doing in Montgomery, Alabama. Problem solver is one of those things that you can attach to a child's experience very early on, right? From the very beginning, they can learn the very basics of what does it mean to be a problem solver, even at the age of 3, right? So that's very exciting for us. So Anita, I want to transition to you, because when we look at how we encourage that, how we empower young women, what role do you see educational institutions and employers playing in fostering gender diversity diversity and equity in STEM fields? And what are some of the best practices to achieve these goals?
So first of all, institutions and educational institutions must be flexible as women have a different thread. And we have to, I thought that your placemat on the table was brilliant, because is it that we pause deliberately? Some of us don't pause as long when we have children, or some of us, our educational journey is different than males have, or we marry and pause, or we stop and pause, or we have the reality, we, women or minority women, have the reality, the statistical reality, that our economic situation is different when we divorce versus men. So we have to take all of that into consideration. So institutions would be wise. Educational institutions and organizations would be wise to understand that women are so valuable, and we need their mindsets, when we need their, we need them as people, that we would be flexible in how institutions would be wise to say, women are so valuable that we will be flexible with their life, that we will pause and either whether it's a student loan, or how we manage our educational benefits in your workplace, or how we listen to them in your education, or even on your job, so that we can retain you. It is so important for us to be able to flow through that work life so that we can continue. Our minds are so important in the workplace. I mean, that was my journey. Am I expecting now, and can I continue my class? I was finishing a master's degree, and I needed to make sure, thank you, and I needed to make sure that I finished that last stats class. Oh, but I'm having a baby. And males don't have to think about that, and that's okay, because we're super women like that. That's what we do. But when you start saying, but how can I pause? And it's tough to have to press through that. And it's unfortunate that we have to think about these multiple things. But organizations and institutions can do that. And if they're wise, they will make a way and make a space for us to do that, because our minds and our input is so important. I told a quick story. I remember being a part of a senior leadership team, vice presidents and up, and I was in a room with 23 white males and me. 23 white males and me, and we were talking about upgrading the mammogram machines in the organization. True story. Well, you can have regular mammogram machines, or you can have digital mammogram machines, and if anybody's in healthcare here, they know the difference. It's very different. Now, for 50% of the women, there's something called dense breasts, and they're harder to see the cancers, and you have to make sure 50% of us, boom, have harder breasts to detect cancer, and you need these digital mammograms. And I'm sitting there listening to them going, well, it's going to cost too much, and why would we switch that out? I said, 50% of all women have dense breasts. Which one of you want to sacrifice your wives' cancer futures? I said, we have to spend the money, and we have to upgrade these mammogram machines. They did, and we did upgrade those mammos. We have to be in the room where it happens. Yes. We have to. And so institutions and organizations have to make sure that we get that education so that we can be in the room where it happens, and so that we can make sure that we get that education and get that advancement, and make sure that we're in the room with 23 white males sometimes, and so that we can be a part of STEM and medicine and make sure that we're making a difference in all of our lives.
Thank you for that passion, and thank you for energizing us. Thank you for talking about flexibility, and also what you also presented to us, right, was persistence, right, and resiliency, and that came through in the last panel, as a matter of fact. So now we're going to transition to you, Teletha. So in terms of particularly when we're talking about resiliency, right, and we're talking about persistence, what are a few of the barriers that prevent women from pursuing careers in STEM? And how do these barriers impact the economy at large? You focus on business transformation, right?
Yeah.
So how, if we aren't persistent, if we aren't encouraged to be persistent and resilient, like what are some of those barriers that we have to persist against? And how does that impact the economy at large?
Absolutely. So I want to say, first of all, no one can do it by themselves, right? There is a real benefit to having partnership. I went back to school for my master's degree. Somewhere in there, I got pregnant with a son. And had to figure out, as you're talking about, right, finishing school, going through delivery, writing my thesis while I'm holding a newborn who also wants all my attention. I had the benefit of an amazing partner in my husband. And I think that understanding that organizations need to partner. One of the programs that Johnson & Johnson has is for women returning to the workforce called Reignite. So if you take a break, you take a break, you've got to explain that gap on your resume, you're not quite sure what to say. Yes. They're welcoming you. They're giving you a mentor as you come back in the door. They're giving you a different type of onboarding, right? So it's not just you figuring it out by yourself. I remember when COVID happened and we had to take calls on Zoom. Does anyone remember you're still on mute?
Oh my gosh.
All right, and you're just, and no one can hear you. Imagine that after having been out of the workforce for 3 years or 4 years, right? So making time to invite them back in. It's okay to say, I want you to have a seat at the table. It's different to invite you and say, this is your seat. And I think that's what matters. And that's what organizations have to do, because organizations that are diverse, and I mean women of color, I mean people of diverse abilities, they're stronger because there's someone that can have that perspective about, hey, dense breast, different problem, right? And so I think organizations have to reach out, have to meet you halfway. Yes, you've got to be persistent. You've got to do, I'm a child of immigrant parents. You have to do your part, right? I always heard that. Also, the teacher's always right. Not sure about that one. But also, organizations have to meet you halfway and put programs in place to welcome you to the table so that you can continue your career.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. And so, Dr. Ward, right, you have the benefit of serving in the current administration and, again, with the Office of Science, Technology, and Policy. And so as a director in that organization, what do you see about, how does the Biden-Harris administration think about STEM and the ecosystem of American society right now? And why is it important that girls and women are educated in STEM, engaged in STEM, and work in the STEM fields?
Great. So I'll channel my big boss, the president, when he says, and many of you have heard this before, but he says that America is the only country in the world that can be defined by one word, which is possibilities. And so where I sit in the Science and Technology office, we really lean into that and think about STEM and science and technology and innovation as a way of harnessing we harness the power of science and technology and innovation to really achieve America's greatest aspirations. And so we recognize that this is critical, but we can't only have some people at the table. To your point, Anita, we really have to have women and girls engaged in this, engaged in STEM along the way in order to achieve America's greatest aspirations. And so I'll just mention, here in Washington, D.C., where I live, and I think some of you are from, but not all, there's been 3 big developments in the last 2 years that I think really exemplify both the power of STEM and innovation, but also present opportunities for the future. And so I'll point to the Inflation Reduction Act, which is really about harnessing clean energy and nature-based solutions to adapt and mitigate climate change. I'll also point to the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, which is bringing broadband and clean lead-free water throughout the country and really building the infrastructure of the future. And then lastly, the CHIPS part of the CHIPS and Science Act, which is bringing leading-edge semiconductor manufacturing back to this country. These are all fruits of science and technology that are, have been presented now, but is also showing that there are opportunities in the future. And we can't just have some people at the table. It's really about bringing women and girls into this early so that we can harness those opportunities. And I'll also mention, we've heard this a little bit already on this panel, but it's not just about women's economic security. It's also about making these STEM fields and industries stronger and better. Yes. You have to have all these viewpoints at the table, and not just at the table or being invited to sit at the table, but in leadership positions too. And so we know that having women at the table makes for stronger decision making.
Ladies, oh my gosh, we had 10 seconds. Woo-hoo! We did it. We made it. All right. And I told you it was going to feel like a speed round, and I really want to encourage you to please follow up with these amazing women. They have so much more to share, but this could not be more impactful and highly integrated into the overall theme of today's conversation, right? When we talk about empowerment, when we talk about that thread of life, when we talk about one of the roles and opportunities that reflects a game changer for women, the salaries, the opportunities that exist in STEM access, education, and opportunities, it doesn't get much better than right here and in this space. So thank you again, Rachel, for making sure that we could be a part of the conversation. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.